My name is Natalie, and I am 24 years old, currently in my second year of medical school. I still remember the moment that changed everything. The sound of the phone call to Child Protective Services echoing in that small examination room. Fear, relief, and hope, all mixed together as I sat there with broken ribs and bruises blooming across my skin. My brother Jake, the golden boy, with the football scholarship, had finally gone too far. My parents wanted silence, but my doctor saw the truth. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you believe everyone deserves safety and no one has the right to take your voice away. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My father Richard was a successful corporate lawyer who worked for one of the biggest firms in town. My mother Grace taught literature at the local high school and was beloved by her students. We lived in a beautiful two-story colonial house in an upscale suburb with a perfectly manicured lawn and a white picket fence that my father repainted every spring. The kind of home that appeared in lifestyle magazines and made neighbors envious. Then there was Jake, my brother, 3 years older than me, and the undisputed star of our family universe. Jake had it all. He maintained straight, as without seeming to try dominated every sport he attempted and possessed the kind of natural charisma that drew people to him like moths to a flame. By high school, he was the quarterback of the football team class president and still somehow found time to volunteer at the local animal shelter. Adults adored him. Teachers praised him and his peers wanted to be him. He was the golden child in every sense of the word. I was different, quieter, more introverted. I preferred books to parties and science experiments to sporting events. My parents often introduced me as our little genius due to my academic achievements, but it always felt like a consolation prize compared to Jake's all-around perfection. I was smart, yes, but in our family, that was never quite enough. The first signs of trouble appeared when I was 7 and Jake was 10. We were playing at the top of the stairs, arguing over a video game controller. In a flash of anger, Jake pushed me. Hard. I tumbled down the entire flight of stairs, landing with a sickening thud at the bottom. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. I had fractured my wrist and suffered a concussion. When my parents rushed me to the emergency room, Jake tearfully told them it had been an accident that I had tripped. I tried to tell them the truth, but my mother squeezed my good hand and whispered, "It was just an accident, right? Natalie, brothers and sisters play rough sometimes." Looking at Jake's frightened face and my parents' expectant expressions, I nodded and confirmed the lie. "I tripped," I said the words, tasting bitter in my mouth. That night, as my father tucked me into bed with my new cast, he stroked my hair and said something I would never forget. Little sisters need to learn to be more careful around their big brothers. Jake has such a bright future ahead of him. It was the first time I heard that phrase, a bright future, but it certainly would not be the last. In our home, Jake's future shone so brightly that it blinded my parents to everything else, including the darkness that was growing inside him. After the stair incident, my parents began making excuses for Jake's behavior with increasing frequency. When he broke my science fair project the night before, judging, they told me I should have kept it somewhere safer. When he borrowed money from my piggy bank without asking, they said I should be more generous with my brother. When he spread rumors about a girl who turned him down for a date, my parents laughed it off as boys being boys. I began to understand the unspoken rule in our house. Jake was untouchable. His future as a star athlete with scholarship potential was the family's most valuable asset. Nothing could be allowed to tarnish that golden image, especially not his increasingly concerning behavior toward me. As the years passed, I became adept at navigating around Jake's moods, making myself scarce when I sensed a storm brewing. I dreamed of the day I would graduate and escape to college, where I could finally build a life beyond his shadow. I convinced myself that if I could just hold on long enough, everything would be okay. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. By the time I entered high school, Jake was already a legend in our town. His name was in the local newspaper almost weekly for his athletic achievements, and college scouts had started attending his games. The pressure on him to perform was intense, coming from our parents, his coaches, and even the community that had pinned their pride on his success. I noticed the change in him during his junior year. The carefree confidence was replaced by a tightly wound tension. He began working out obsessively, sometimes spending 3 or 4 hours in the home gym our parents had built in the basement. His temper, always quick to flare, became even more volatile. Small frustrations would send him into fits of rage that left everyone walking on eggshells. The first serious incident happened when I was 14. I was doing homework at the kitchen table when Jake stormed in, tossing his backpack onto the counter. I could tell by the set of his shoulders that he had had a bad day. Coach had benched him during practice for missing a crucial play, and his AP calculus teacher had given him a C on a test. I tried to make myself invisible, focusing intently on my algebra problems. But then I reached for my water bottle and accidentally knocked it over. Water spilled across the table, soaking Jake's history paper that was due the next day. Before I could even apologize, Jake exploded. He slammed his fist into the wall beside my head, leaving a hole in the drywall and causing me to shrink back in terror. "You stupid little bitch!" he screamed, his face inches from mine, spittle flying from his lips. "Do you have any idea how long that took me? Are you really that pathetic and clumsy?" I was frozen, unable to speak or move as he continued berating me. When our parents came running in to investigate the commotion, Jake immediately changed his demeanor. "Sorry about the wall," he said, voice calm again. "I was frustrated about school and lost my temper. Natalie accidentally ruined my history paper." My mother's response was to get paper towels and blot Jake's assignment while my father assessed the damage to the wall. "That is going to need patching," he sighed. Then turning to me, "Natalie, please be more careful around your brother's schoolwork. You know how important this year is for his college applications." Neither of them acknowledged how close Jake's fist had come to my face or how he had screamed at me. When I tried to bring it up later that evening, my mother dismissed my concerns. "You are being too sensitive," she said. "Jake is under a lot of pressure right now. Try not to provoke him." That night marked a turning point. Jake seemed to realize that he could get away with almost anything when it came to me. Over the next 2 years, his abuse became systematic rather than random outbursts. He would wait until our parents were out or distracted, then find ways to torment me. He began monitoring my social life, interrogating me about who I talked to at school. When I made friends with a boy in my chemistry class, Jake cornered him in the school bathroom and threatened him to stay away from me. One by one, my friends stopped calling or sitting with me at lunch. I became increasingly isolated, exactly as Jake wanted. The physical intimidation escalated gradually. A shove here, a slap there, always careful to leave marks that could be hidden or explained away. He would pin me against walls, grabbing my wrists so tightly they bruised, warning me to keep my mouth shut about things he did not want our parents to know, like the alcohol he smuggled into the house, or the girls he brought over when our parents worked late. I lived in constant fear, developing strategies to minimize contact with him. I would wake up early to use the bathroom, before he did eat dinner quickly, and retreat to my room, spend weekends at the library, claiming I needed to study. I became a ghost in my own home, trying to fade into the background to avoid becoming a target. I started keeping a journal hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice on my bookshelf. In it, I documented everything: dates, times, what Jake said, what he did, how our parents responded. Sometimes, writing was the only thing that kept me sane, the only proof that I was not imagining things or being too sensitive, as my mother constantly suggested. I also began planning my escape. I researched colleges as far away from home as possible, poured myself into academics, knowing that scholarships were my ticket to freedom. I babysit for neighbors and tutored younger students, saving every dollar in a bank account my parents did not know about. I was determined to survive until graduation, to build a life where Jake could never reach me again. But fate had other plans. The worst was yet to come, and no amount of planning could have prepared me for what happened next. I was 17 midway through my senior year, and Jake was 20, a sophomore in college, with a full athletic scholarship to a prestigious university 3 states away. His absence had given me room to breathe, to reclaim small parts of myself and our home. For the first time in years, I was sleeping through the night without waking to every creak and footstep. But Jake still came home for holidays and occasional weekends, especially after important games. That particular weekend, his team had suffered a crushing defeat against their biggest rival, costing them a shot at the conference championship. I had watched the game on television, with my parents feeling a complex mix of emotions as the camera zoomed in on Jake's furious face when the final whistle blew. "He will be upset," my father said, already making excuses. "We should make his favorite meal tomorrow. Cheer him up." When Jake arrived the next evening, the atmosphere in the house immediately changed, charged with the electricity of his barely contained rage. Dinner was a tense affair, with my parents fawning over him, asking about his classes, but carefully avoiding any mention of the lost game. The referee was blind. Jake finally exploded, stabbing his fork into his steak. "We should have won. Coach did not prepare us properly." "Of course," my mother soothed. "Anyone watching could see that call was unfair." I kept my eyes on my plate, pushing food around without eating, counting the minutes until I could excuse myself. But then my father turned to me, perhaps trying to change the subject. "Natalie has some exciting news," he said. "Tell your brother about your college acceptances." I froze fork midway to my mouth. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention to myself, especially by discussing my own successes when Jake was already volatile. But 3 pairs of eyes were now fixed on me, waiting. "I got into Northwestern and Columbia," I said quietly, still waiting to hear from Stanford. "Full scholarships?" Jake asked, his voice deceptively casual. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Well, isn't that something?" he said, pushing back from the table. "Little Natalie heading to the Ivy League while I bust my ass on the football field? Must be nice to have it so easy." "Jake, that is not fair," my mother started, but he was already storming from the room, leaving his half-eaten dinner behind. Later that night, I was in my bedroom studying when my phone buzzed with a text. It was my friend Emily asking if I wanted to join a study group the next day. As I was typing my response, my bedroom door flew open. Jake stood there, swaying slightly, the smell of alcohol wafting from him. "Where's my phone?" he demanded. "I don't know," I answered, confused. "Why would I have your phone?" "I left it somewhere, and you were always snooping around my stuff," he slurred, stepping into my room and slamming the door behind him. My heart began racing. Jake was drunk and looking for a fight. I needed to defuse the situation quickly. "I have not seen it," I said, standing up slowly. "Maybe you left it downstairs. I can help you look." Jake ignored my offer, starting to rifle through my desk drawers, tossing papers and books onto the floor. "You are such a little sneak." Always watching, always judging. I am not judging you, Jake. Please let me help you find your phone, and then I need to finish studying. He spun around, eyes narrowed. Studying. Right. Because you are so perfect. Miss 4.0 GPA, Miss Full Ride Scholarship. Just then, a buzz came from his back pocket. Jake reached behind him and pulled out his phone, looking momentarily confused. As he unlocked the screen, I caught a glimpse of a text that made my blood run cold. Got the stuff for Saturday. $200 cash like usual. Jake saw me looking, and something dark passed over his face. He shoved the phone back in his pocket, but it was too late. I had seen enough to know he was buying drugs, probably performance enhancers, given the pressure he was under to improve his game stats. You did not see anything, he said, voice low and dangerous. I did not see anything, I agreed, quickly taking a step back. It is none of my business. Damn right it is not. He advanced on me, backing me against the wall. If you tell Mom and Dad, if you tell anyone, I will make you sorry you were ever born. I would not tell anyone, Jake. I promise. He seemed to consider this, then nodded once. As he turned to leave, relief flooded through me. But then he spotted my phone on the bed, the text from Emily, still visible on the screen. In one fluid motion, he grabbed it. Who is Emily? He demanded, scrolling through my messages. Just a friend from school. We are studying for AP Bio together. Studying, huh? He continued reading my private conversations, his face darkening. What is this? You told her. I push you around. You told her you are afraid of me. My stomach dropped. Months ago, after a particularly bad incident, I had confided in Emily. She was the only person I had ever told about Jake's behavior. It was nothing, I said desperately, just venting about normal sibling stuff. Jake's face contorted with fury. He threw my phone against the wall with such force that it shattered, pieces of glass and plastic scattering across the floor. Then he was on me, grabbing my shoulders and slamming me back against the wall. You little liar, he hissed. You have been telling people I abuse you, trying to ruin my reputation. No, Jake, please, I gasped, struggling against his grip. It was just girl talk, nothing serious. But he was beyond reason. He shoved me hard, and I stumbled, falling to the floor. Before I could scramble away, his foot connected with my side in a vicious kick. The pain was blinding, stealing my breath. Then another kick, and another. I curled into a ball, trying to protect myself as he continued his assault, raining blows on my ribs and back. I do not know how long it lasted. At some point, I heard myself begging him to stop, my voice, a thin, reedy sound I barely recognized. The last thing I remember was a particularly brutal kick to my side that made something crack inside me, a sickening sound, followed by pain so intense that darkness swallowed me whole. When I regained consciousness, I was still on my bedroom floor. The house was quiet except for hushed voices coming from downstairs. Every breath was agony, a stabbing pain in my side that suggested at least one broken rib. I tried to move, and nearly passed out again from the pain. Somehow, I managed to pull myself onto my bed, tears streaming down my face. I lay there in the dark, listening as footsteps climbed the stairs. My door opened slightly, and my mother's silhouette appeared in the doorway. "Natalie," she whispered, "are you awake?" I made a small sound of acknowledgement, unable to form words through the pain. She came to sit on the edge of my bed, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "Jake told us what happened," she said softly. "About the fight." I waited, wondering which version of events Jake had shared. "He says he pushed you and you fell. That things got out of hand. He feels terrible." I tried to speak, to tell her about the kicks, the broken rib, but she hushed me. "Listen carefully, Natalie. Your father and I have discussed this. Jake has the NFL Combine coming up next month. Scouts will be watching him. This scholarship is his future, the future we have all worked for. I could not believe what I was hearing. My mother continued, her voice eerily calm. We are going to take you to Dr. Wilson in the morning. He is a family friend. We will tell him you fell down the stairs. He will treat you discreetly. Mom, I managed to whisper. Jake kicked me. Multiple times. I think my rib is broken. Her hand tightened on mine almost painfully. Natalie, I need you to listen to me. Jake made a mistake. He was drunk and upset about the game. But this one incident cannot derail everything he has worked for. Everything we have all sacrificed for. He hurt me, I insisted, my voice breaking. This is not the first time. My mother stood up, her silhouette rigid in the darkness. You need to stay quiet about this. For the family, Jake is our future. Your father and I are counting on his career. The scouts, the endorsements, all of it. We cannot lose that because of one bad night. She moved to the door, pausing before she left. Just tell the doctor you fell. That is all. We will get through this as a family. As the door closed behind her, I lay in the darkness, cradling my injured side. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain. In my parents' eyes, I was collateral damage, an acceptable sacrifice on the altar of Jake's success. That night, something broke inside me that had nothing to do with my ribs. It was the last remnant of trust I had in the people who were supposed to protect me. The next morning, every movement was torture. My entire left side was a canvas of purple and blue bruises, and I could not take a deep breath without feeling like I was being stabbed. My father helped me to the car, while my mother hovered anxiously, repeatedly, reminding me of our cover story. Remember, you were carrying laundry downstairs and missed a step, she coached as we drove. Keep it simple, no need for details. Jake had conveniently returned to campus early that morning, avoiding any confrontation. As we pulled into the parking lot of a small private clinic 30 minutes from our home, I realized why we had bypassed the local hospital. My parents were avoiding mandatory reporters and potential questions. Dr. Wilson was not just a family friend. He was someone they believed they could control. The waiting room was nearly empty when we arrived. My mother approached the receptionist with a practiced smile, explaining that I had taken a nasty fall and needed to be seen right away. Within minutes, I was called back, my parents rising to accompany me. But instead of Dr. Wilson, a woman in a white coat approached us, extending her hand to my father. I am Dr. Amanda Reynolds, she said, her voice warm but professional. Dr. Wilson had an emergency and asked me to cover his patients today. I saw panic flash across my mother's face before she composed herself. Oh, but we specifically requested Dr. Wilson. He knows our family history. I understand, Dr. Reynolds said sympathetically, but I assure you, I am fully qualified to assess your daughter's injuries. Unless you would prefer to reschedule. My father glanced at me, noting how I was hunched over in pain. No, that will not be necessary. Natalie needs to be seen today. Dr. Reynolds nodded, gesturing for me to follow her. Great. If you could come with me, Natalie. Standard procedure is for me to speak with teenage patients privately first, then bring parents in for the treatment discussion. I do not think that is necessary, my mother interjected quickly. I would prefer to stay with my daughter. Mom, I said. Surprised by my own boldness, it is okay. I will be fine. Dr. Reynolds smiled reassuringly. It will just take a few minutes. Hospital policy for patients over 16. You can wait right here. Before my parents could protest further, she guided me gently into an examination room and closed the door. Dr. Reynolds was around 40, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She helped me onto the examination table, noting my winces of pain. "So, Natalie," she said, washing her hands at the sink your mother mentioned, "you fell down the stairs carrying laundry." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak the lie aloud. "Can you show me where it hurts the most?" I indicated my left side, and she carefully lifted my shirt to examine the area. I heard her sharp intake of breath at the sight of the extensive bruising. "These are significant injuries," she said, her voice neutral, as she gently palpated my ribs. "Can you tell me exactly how you fell?" "I tripped," I mumbled, avoiding her eyes. "Lost my balance." Dr. Reynolds continued her examination in silence for a moment, her touch clinical but gentle. When she spoke again, her voice had softened. "Natalie, I have worked in emergency medicine for 15 years. These injuries are not consistent with falling downstairs." My heart began to race. "What do you mean?" She sat on a stool, bringing herself to my eye level. "The pattern of bruising suggests multiple impacts from a focused source, like a fist or a foot. Not the broader trauma you would see from tumbling downstairs." Tears welled in my eyes, but I remained silent. "I am going to ask you a direct question, and I want you to know that this room is a safe space. Whatever you tell me stays between us, unless I believe you are in immediate danger." She paused, making sure I was listening. "Did someone do this to you, Natalie?" The kindness in her eyes was my undoing. After years of hiding, of being told my pain did not matter, someone was finally seeing me, really seeing me. "My brother," I whispered the words barely audible. Dr. Reynolds nodded, no shock or judgment on her face. "Can you tell me what happened?" Slowly, haltingly, I began to speak. About the night before, about the years of abuse, about my parents' response. Once I started, I could not stop. The words poured out of me like water through a broken dam, years of secrets and fear rushing into the open air. Throughout my story, Dr. Reynolds listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but never doubting or interrupting me. When I finally fell silent, emotionally exhausted, she reached out and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," she said. "What you have experienced is abuse, and it is not your fault, not any of it." "My parents want me to keep quiet," I said, fear creeping back into my voice. "They say Jake has a future, that I will ruin everything if I tell the truth." Dr. Reynolds's expression hardened slightly. "Your brother made his choices when he decided to hurt you, and your parents made theirs when they decided to protect him instead of you. But you have a choice too, Natalie, and I want you to know that I am on your side, whatever you decide." She stood and picked up her tablet, typing some notes. "Medically, you have at least one fractured rib, possibly two. I need to order X-rays to confirm. The good news is that ribs typically heal on their own with rest and pain management. The bad news is that I cannot in good conscience send you back into that house." My stomach knotted with fear. What does that mean? Dr. Reynolds sat down again, her expression serious but kind. "As a mandated reporter, I am required by law to contact Child Protective Services when I suspect abuse. Based on your injuries and your statement, I need to make that call." "My parents will be furious," I whispered. "That is not your burden to carry," she said firmly. "Your only job right now is to focus on healing both physically and emotionally, and that starts with keeping you safe." She stood and took several photos of my injuries with a medical camera documenting the extent of the bruising. As she worked, she spoke in a calm, reassuring voice, explaining each step of the process ahead. Then she pulled up a chair and sat directly in front of me, taking both my hands in hers. "Natalie, I want you to hear me clearly. You are safe now. What your brother did was wrong. What your parents did was wrong. No scholarship, no future athletic career. Nothing justifies what was done to you. Your safety matters. You matter." In that moment, something shifted inside me. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that there might be life beyond the fear I had lived with for so long. Dr. Reynolds squeezed my hands once more, then reached for the phone on the wall. "I need to make this call now," she said. "Would you like to wait here while I speak with your parents first?" I nodded, unable to face them just yet. As she left the room, I heard her instructing a nurse to stay with me. The door closed, and I sat in the sudden quiet, terrified, but also strangely relieved. The secret was out. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be fighting this battle alone. From the examination room, I could hear raised voices, though the words were muffled by the closed door. The nurse Dr. Reynolds had assigned to stay with me tried to distract me with small talk, but I was too anxious to engage. After what seemed like an eternity, there was a knock at the door, and a police officer entered alongside a woman in professional attire who introduced herself as Sandra Martinez from Child Protective Services. "Hello," Natalie, Sandra said gently. "Dr. Reynolds has shared her concerns with us. I know this must be overwhelming, but we are here to help ensure your safety." The next few hours passed in a blur. I was taken for X-rays, which confirmed 2 fractured ribs. The police officer, Detective Collins, took my statement, asking me to recount not just the previous night's events, but also the pattern of abuse over the years. I was grateful for my secret journal then, as I could provide specific dates and incidents that supported my account. Meanwhile, Sandra explained that given the severity of the situation, I would not be returning home that day. "We have emergency placement options," she told me. "A temporary foster home, or if you prefer, we can explore whether you have any relatives who might be appropriate." My mind immediately went to my mother's sister, Aunt Caroline, who lived in a neighboring state. She and my mother had grown distant over the years, partly because Aunt Caroline had once confronted my parents about their obvious favoritism toward Jake. I had always felt a connection with her during her rare visits. "My aunt," I said. "I think she would help." Sandra nodded. "We will need to vet her, but that is certainly an option we can explore. For tonight, though, we need to get you settled somewhere safe." As I was preparing to leave with Sandra, my parents appeared in the doorway of the examination room. My father's face was tight, with barely contained rage, while my mother looked as though she had been crying. "This is completely unnecessary," my father said, addressing Detective Collins rather than me. "We are her parents. You cannot just take her." Mr. Davis, the detective, replied calmly, "Given the nature of the allegations and the documented injuries, we are following standard protocol for suspected child abuse cases." "Allegations," my father spat. "Based on what a teenage girl's dramatized account, kids exaggerate all the time." His dismissal of my experience, even in the face of my obvious injuries, cut deep. But Detective Collins remained unfazed. "The medical evidence supports her statement, sir. And we will be interviewing your son as well to get his side of the story." At the mention of Jake, my mother stepped forward, her composure cracking. "Please, you cannot do this. Jake has the NFL Combine next month. If this gets out, his career will be over before it begins." Sandra, from CPS, exchanged a glance with the detective before addressing my mother. "Mrs. Davis, I understand this is difficult, but your daughter has suffered serious physical injuries. Her well-being has to be our priority right now." "She is just jealous," my mother insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. She has always been jealous of Jake's success. This is her way of getting attention. Her words hit me like physical blows. Even now, faced with undeniable evidence of what Jake had done, she was choosing him, choosing the dream of his future over the reality of my pain. Detective Collins stepped between us. "Mrs. Davis, these accusations are not helpful. I suggest you and your husband consult with an attorney. There will be a family court hearing within the next 72 hours to determine next steps." As I was escorted out of the clinic through a side entrance to avoid a scene, I caught one last glimpse of my parents. My father was on his phone, likely calling his lawyer colleagues, while my mother stood frozen watching me leave with strangers. I wondered if even now she was thinking of me at all, or if her thoughts were only of how this would affect Jake. That night I stayed in an emergency foster placement, a tidy home with a kind older couple who had been taking in children in crisis for over 20 years. They gave me space, asking no questions beyond whether I was comfortable and if my pain medication was working. In the quiet of the spare bedroom, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since everything had happened, grieving not just for the physical pain, but for the family I had lost. Or perhaps had never really had. The next day brought a flurry of activity. Jake was brought in for questioning by campus police, and according to Sandra, was initially belligerent and dismissive. "It was just a sibling fight that got out of hand," he reportedly told them. "She is blowing it way out of proportion." But when confronted with the photographs of my injuries and informed that Dr. Reynolds had stated they were inconsistent with a fall, his story began to change. He admitted to pushing me, but claimed he had no memory of kicking me, suggesting he had been too drunk to recall his actions clearly. Meanwhile, Sandra had contacted Aunt Caroline, who immediately agreed to take me in. She was outraged, Sandra told me. Said she had suspected something was wrong in your home for years, but had been shut out by your parents whenever she raised concerns. As preparations were made for me to temporarily relocate to my aunt's home pending the court hearing, the pressure from my extended family intensified. Calls and text messages flooded in from relatives, most of whom had never shown much interest in my life before. The message was always the same: recant my statement, say it was all a misunderstanding, think about what this would do to Jake and our family. My father's sister, who had always idolized Jake, left a particularly painful voicemail. "Do you have any idea what you have done? Jake has been suspended from the team pending investigation. Those scouts will not wait. This is his one shot, and you are destroying it because you could not handle a little roughhousing. Shame on you." Each message was like a knife twisting deeper. But for every relative who condemned me, there were others who offered support. Aunt Caroline, of course, but also my father's college roommate, who had remained close to our family, and even my maternal grandmother, who called to tell me she was proud of me for speaking up. "I kept quiet when your grandfather had a temper," she told me, her voice shaking with emotion. "In my day, that is what women did. But it was wrong then, and it is wrong now. You are braver than I ever was." 3 days after I left home, we appeared in family court. Jake was there looking subdued in a button-up shirt and slacks, rather than his usual athletic wear. My parents sat beside him, a united front. On the other side of the courtroom, I sat between Sandra and a court-appointed advocate feeling small and exposed. The judge reviewed the evidence, including the medical reports, photographs, police statements, and assessments from Sandra and other professionals. When it was time for me to speak, I forced myself to look directly at Jake as I recounted not just the incident that broke my ribs, but the years of intimidation and abuse that had preceded it. "He made me afraid in my own home," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And when I was hurt, my parents told me to stay quiet because his future mattered more than my safety." Jake stared at the table throughout my testimony, refusing to meet my eyes. When it was his turn to speak, he offered a carefully worded apology that sounded rehearsed. "I never meant to hurt my sister," he said. "I have been under immense pressure, and I turned to alcohol to cope. I deeply regret my actions and am committed to getting help for my issues with anger and substance abuse." It was a performance designed to elicit sympathy, complete with a remorseful glance in my direction, but the judge seemed unimpressed. "Actions have consequences, young man," she said firmly. "Pressure and alcohol may explain your behavior, but they do not excuse it." The judge's ruling was clear. I would remain in my aunt's custody while the criminal investigation proceeded. Jake was ordered to have no contact with me, and my parents would be required to undergo parenting classes and counseling if they wanted to work toward reunification. As we left the courtroom, my mother tried to approach me, tears streaming down her face. "Natalie, please," she began, but Sandra gently steered me toward the exit. "Give her time," Sandra advised my mother. "This is not about punishing you or Jake. It is about keeping Natalie safe while everyone gets the help they need." In the car on the way to Aunt Caroline's house, I sat quietly, watching my hometown recede in the side mirror. I felt hollow, emptied out by the events of the past week. But beneath the exhaustion and grief, there was something else beginning to take root. A sense that for the first time in years, I was moving toward something rather than just trying to escape. "You did good in there," Sandra said, breaking the silence. "I know it does not feel like it right now, but speaking your truth was an incredibly brave thing to do." I nodded, unable to find words for the mix of emotions churning inside me. But as we crossed the state line, putting physical distance between me and the house that had become my prison, I allowed myself to consider a possibility that had seemed impossible just days before, that I might actually have a future of my prison, own one not defined by Jake's shadow or my parents' expectations, a future where I could be safe and valued and heard. Living with Aunt Caroline was like stepping into an alternate universe. Her modest three-bedroom house was nothing like my parents' showcase home, but it was warm and inviting in a way our house had never been. My aunt, a high school counselor with a specialty in trauma, gave me both space and support, never pushing me to talk, but always making it clear she was available when I was ready. "The guest room is yours for as long as you need it," she told me, on my first night there. "This is your home now, Natalie. No conditions attached." The physical healing came slowly. My ribs ached with every breath, limiting my movements and reminding me constantly of what had happened. But Aunt Caroline found me a trauma-informed physical therapist who specialized in working with abuse survivors, teaching me breathing exercises that helped manage the pain and grounding techniques for when the memories became overwhelming. The emotional healing was more complicated. Nightmares plagued my sleep, vivid reenactments of that night and others before it. During the day, I jumped at sudden movements and flinched when people raised their voices. A therapist named Dr. Martinez diagnosed me with PTSD and began working with me twice weekly, helping me process not just the recent trauma, but the years of fear and hypervigilance that had shaped my adolescence. "Your brain and body learned that home wasn't safe," she explained. "We need to help them understand that things are different now." Gradually, I began to rebuild my life. Aunt Caroline helped me transfer to a new high school for my final semester, where no one knew me as Jake's little sister. With the support of my new school counselor, I was able to maintain my GPA, despite everything that had happened, keeping my college scholarships secure. I made a few cautious friendships, though I struggled to trust people, and rarely shared the full story of why I had moved mid-senior year. The journal I had kept for years became a lifeline during this period. Dr. Martinez encouraged me to continue documenting my experiences, not just the traumatic memories, but also moments of joy, strength, and progress. This is your story, she told me. Not Jake's, not your parents', yours to tell in your own way. Inspired by her words, I expanded my journaling into more structured, writing, crafting, narrative essays that helped me make sense of what had happened. I wrote about the subtle ways my parents had enabled Jake's behavior over the years, about the cultural worship of male athletes that had contributed to my brother's sense of entitlement, about the isolation that had allowed the abuse to continue unchecked for so long. One essay titled "The Golden Child's Shadow" caught the attention of my English teacher, who encouraged me to submit it to a national writing contest for high school students. When it won first place, seeing my words in print was both terrifying and empowering. For the first time, I was not just telling my story, but being heard. As my confidence grew, I also began to connect with other survivors through a support group Dr. Martinez recommended. Sitting in a circle with people of different ages and backgrounds who nonetheless understood aspects of my experience without explanation was profoundly healing. I was not alone, and I was not defined by what had happened to me. Through all of this, the legal proceedings continued. Jake had been charged with assault, a serious but not career-ending charge given that it was his first official offense. His lawyer, paid for by my parents, worked tirelessly to minimize the consequences, emphasizing Jake's clean record, academic achievements, and promising athletic career. The district attorney assigned to my case, a no-nonsense woman named Julia Winters, warned me that the defense would likely try to undermine my credibility. They will say you exaggerated, that you have always been jealous of your brother, that you are seeking attention, she explained. We need to be prepared for that. She was right. As the trial date approached, Jake's defense team filed a motion requesting access to my therapy records, claiming they would show I had a history of emotional instability and attention-seeking behavior. Julia fought the motion successfully, but it was a stark reminder of what I was up against. Then, 3 weeks before the trial was set to begin, an unexpected development changed everything. 2 former girlfriends of Jake's came forward after learning about his arrest, each with stories of controlling and physically intimidating behavior similar to what I had experienced. One had campus security reports documenting an incident where Jake had punched a wall during an argument, and the other had text messages in which Jake had threatened her when she tried to break up with him. This changes the game, Julia told me during our next meeting. Their testimony establishes a pattern of behavior that supports your account. When Jake's lawyer learned of these new witnesses, he quickly approached Julia about a plea deal. Jake would plead guilty to a lesser charge of reckless endangerment, receive a suspended sentence, and be required to complete an intensive anger management program and community service. He would also be on probation for 2 years, during which any violation could result in jail time. Julia presented the offer to me carefully. This would mean no trial, no cross-examination, she explained, but it also means a less severe punishment than we might get if we went to trial and won. I considered the options, discussing them with Aunt Caroline, Dr. Martinez, and Sandra from CPS. A trial would mean publicly recounting every painful detail being painted as a liar by Jake's attorney and potentially seeing my brother go to jail. Even with a suspended sentence, a felony conviction would likely end Jake's athletic aspirations permanently. What happens to Jake isn't your responsibility, Aunt Carolyn reminded me. You need to make the decision that feels right for you, for your healing. After much reflection, I agreed to the plea deal with one additional condition. Jake would be required to undergo a substance abuse evaluation and comply with any recommended treatment. Not to save his career, but because I genuinely believed his alcohol use had exacerbated his violent tendencies, even if it hadn't caused them. The day Jake formally entered his plea, I attended court with Aunt Caroline and Dr. Martinez for support. My parents were there too, sitting behind Jake as they had at every hearing. My mother looked aged beyond her years, the stress of the past months etched into her face. My father sat rigidly beside her, his expression unreadable. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I stepped forward, my prepared remarks clutched in trembling hands. I spoke not just to the court, but directly to Jake, who was finally forced to meet my eyes. "The physical injuries you inflicted have healed," I told him, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "But the knowledge that my own brother could hurt me so badly, and that our parents could choose your future over my safety, is a wound that may never fully close. I do not hate you, Jake, but I am no longer afraid of you either, and I will never again be silent about what you did." As I returned to my seat, Jake's shoulders slumped. For the first time since that night, I saw what might have been genuine remorse in his expression. But when my mother reached to embrace me as I passed their row, I stiffened and moved away. The breach of trust was still too raw, the wound too fresh for such easy reconciliation. Outside the courthouse, my father approached me while my mother spoke with Jake's lawyer. "Your mother and I love you, Natalie," he said awkwardly. "We handled everything wrong. I see that now." "Do you?" I asked. "Because from where I stand, you are still supporting Jake in every way while I am living with Aunt Caroline." He had no response to that. As he walked away to join my mother, I realized that despite his words, nothing fundamental had changed. They might recognize their mistakes intellectually, but emotionally, Jake was still the center of their universe, and perhaps he always would be. But standing there in the autumn sunlight, watching my family members return to their separate cars, I felt something unexpected pity. They were trapped in the narrative they had created, unable to imagine a different kind of family dynamic. I, on the other hand, was free to build something new. That evening, as Aunt Caroline and I shared dinner on her back porch, she raised her glass in a toast. "To your strength," she said simply, "and to new beginnings." I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a sense of possibility unfurling inside me. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years, it was mine to choose. 7 years have passed since that day in the courthouse. I am now 24, in my second year of medical school, pursuing my dream of becoming a pediatrician. My apartment is small but cozy, filled with books, plants, and photographs of the people who have supported me through my journey. Aunt Caroline is prominent in those photos. After I graduated high school, I moved with her to attend college in her city, not wanting to return to my hometown, even after I legally became an adult. She has become more mother than aunt to me, celebrating my victories and supporting me through the inevitable setbacks of young adulthood. I have built a circle of friends who know my story and love me not despite it, but as an integral part of who I am. Dating has been more challenging as trust comes slowly to me, but I have recently begun a relationship with a kind, patient man who understands my boundaries and respects them without question. As for my biological family, those relationships remain complicated. My parents and I speak occasionally, usually on holidays or birthdays. They have apologized many times for their failures, and I believe they are sincere, but some fractures cannot be fully repaired. They still see Jake regularly, though he no longer lives at home. Jake's life took a different path than the one our parents had envisioned. The plea deal and probation effectively ended his football career, forcing him to confront who he was without the identity of star athlete. According to my mother, he struggled initially, dropping out of college and working a series of dead-end jobs while battling depression. 2 years ago, He entered a comprehensive rehabilitation program for alcohol abuse after a DUI arrest nearly violated his probation. Since then, he has slowly rebuilt his life, returning to school to study physical therapy and volunteering with youth sports programs. We have not spoken directly since the court case, though he sent me a letter of apology on my college graduation that seemed genuinely remorseful. I do not know if forgiveness is possible or even necessary between us. What I do know is that I no longer carry the weight of his actions or my parents' choices. That burden belongs to them, not to me. The most unexpected relationship to emerge from this chapter of my life has been with Dr. Amanda Reynolds, the physician who first saw through the lies and gave me the courage to speak my truth. We reconnected 3 years ago when I began volunteering at a clinic for at-risk youth, where she now serves as medical director. When she recognized me in the orientation session, her face lit up with a mixture of surprise and joy. "Natalie," she said, embracing me warmly, "look at you." Over coffee afterward, I told her about my journey since that day in her examination room, about college and my acceptance to medical school. "You are part of the reason I chose this path," I admitted. "You showed me the difference one person can make in a moment of crisis." Dr. Reynolds, who insisted I now call her Amanda, has become a mentor and friend, guiding me through the challenges of medical school and helping me navigate the complex healthcare system. Under her guidance, I have developed a particular interest in recognizing and addressing signs of abuse in pediatric patients, hoping to be for other children what she was for me, a lifeline when they need it most. Last summer, I began volunteering with a support group for teenage survivors of family violence, sharing my story as part of their healing process. The first time I stood before those young faces, some defiant, some fearful, all carrying wounds both visible and invisible, I felt a profound sense of purpose. "Your voice matters," I told them. "No one has the right to take your safety, no matter who they are or what future they might have. Sometimes the people who should protect us fail, but that doesn't mean you are alone." As I continue to build my life and career, I carry the lessons of my past without being defined by them. I have learned that family is not just about blood, but about who shows up when you need them most. I have learned that speaking truth, however painful, is the first step toward healing, and I have learned that sometimes the most profound act of self-love is to walk away from those who cannot or will not keep you safe. The path I am on now is not the one I would have chosen as a frightened 17-year-old with broken ribs and a broken heart. It has been harder in many ways, requiring me to build a foundation of support from scratch rather than relying on the family structure I was born into. But it has also been infinitely more authentic, allowing me to become the person I was meant to be rather than a shadow in my brother's golden light. If you are watching this and recognize your own story and mine, please know this. Your safety matters, your voice matters, your future matters. No scholarship, no career, no family reputation is worth your physical and emotional well-being. The road to healing is not linear and it is not always fair, but it is possible, and you deserve every step forward you take. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and your own well-being? What helped you find the strength to speak up or walk away? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Please hit subscribe if this resonated with you, and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more healing than the one we were born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that whatever you are going through, you are not alone.